and Goyim Defense League, for whatever that is, for violating civil rights of members of the Nashville Jewish Center.
Without objection. I'll now recognize the gentlelady from Washington for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's quite unprecedented for us to use committee time, valuable committee time, to target a specific group. And based on what I'm hearing, the criticisms of the Southern Poverty Law Center seem to boil down to three things. One, that it has healthy finances and an endowment. Two, that it collaborated with the Department of Justice during the Biden administration. And three, that it calls out white supremacy, including white Christian nationalism. And I guess if my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are so hell-bent on the finances of nonprofits, we could also talk about the Koch brothers funding tens of hundreds of millions of dollars to the Cato Institute and Americans for Prosperity. If they're so concerned about nonprofits collaborating with the executive branch, where do I even begin with the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025? Throughout his campaign, Donald Trump disavowed the conservative nonprofits policy blueprint when polls showed that it was deeply unpopular with the American people. But as soon as he took office, he made it the foundation of his policies by appointing at least half a dozen Project 2025 architects and supporters to oversee the federal budget, mass deportations, cuts to healthcare and SNAP, dismantling of environmental protections, policies that harm all communities and disproportionately target communities of color. Now, maybe this shouldn't be a surprise. The president has a history of nominating or appointing officials with racist beliefs, including Paul Ingracia and Carl Higbee. The architects of Project 2025 also have a very well-documented history of writing racist statements or activity. And I won't repeat all of them here, but I do have a visual right behind me with just a couple of examples, including assertions that Black people and immigrants have lower IQs than white citizens. We've known for a while that individuals differ in their inherent capabilities, that racists do too, with whites and Asians on the top and blacks on the bottom. That was from Richard Hamania, contributor to Project 2025. How about this one? The ceaseless importation of third world foreigners with no tradition of, taste for, or experience in liberty means that the electorate grows more left and less traditionally American, whatever that means, with every cycle. That's from Michael Anton, also a contributor to Project 2025. How about this one? The prediction that new Hispanic immigrants will have low IQ children and grandchildren is difficult to argue against. That's from Jason Richwine, contributor to Project 2025. And just today I was reading an article about a member of the Judiciary Committee who said, "It is time for a Muslim travel ban, radical deportations of all mainstream Muslim legal and illegal immigrants, and citizenship revocations wherever possible. Mainstream Muslims have declared war on us. The least we can do is kick them the hell out of America." Do people understand that there's 2 billion Muslims across the world? That is 25% of the global population. And I'm waiting to see if anybody on that side says anything about condemning those remarks about Muslims. So I think we should be very clear here about what is going on. And Ms. Tyler, I just want to ask you, what role does rhetoric like these quotes that I mentioned, what role does it play in promoting white supremacy and violence? And what happens when we give people who espouse this kind of rhetoric more responsibility in our civic institutions?
Well, rhetoric like this certainly furthers white supremacy and can further discrimination and potentially violence against marginalized communities, particularly in the minds of violent extremists when it combines with more extreme views like the Great Replacement theory, as it has done and killed people in this country. And when this rhetoric is also espoused by people who hold government power, members of these marginalized communities will fear not just that violence might come to their community, but also that the force of government might be used against them in various ways.
Civil rights groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center have a long history of suing white supremacist groups for violent rhetoric and actions that target communities of color. What are some of those lawsuits, and why are they critical for keeping communities safe?
Well, I think Mr. Cohen just referenced a recent lawsuit that was filed that involved a Jewish community center and some individuals who entered that with the intent to intimidate and potentially commit violence. And they brought a lawsuit that included claims under the Ku Klux Klan Act.
This is such important work, and yet we're trying to undermine the SPLC simply because it disagrees with far-right policies and shines a spotlight on white supremacist ideology. How has the Trump administration used the power of the federal government to silence and weaken these groups like SPLC?
Well, we've seen a number of actions this year. Some of them are rhetorical by blaming, for instance, Lutheran social service organizations, accusing them baselessly of money laundering. That was in the early Doge attacks. And then more recently with the presidential memorandum that has this very broad language that tries to link ideologies that are really ill-defined, ideologies like anti-capitalism or anti-Christianity, trying to link those without evidence to violent conduct. And the impact of that is that it will chill advocacy, that it tries to silence dissent. Because even if that presidential memorandum lacks the force of law, since there are no laws, on the books around domestic terrorism, they do serve to be a warning to groups that if you oppose this administration, that you will come under scrutiny, extra scrutiny like this hearing.
And a threat to free speech rights of some of us matter to all of us. I thank you.
I thank the gentlelady from Washington. Now recognize the gentleman from Missouri for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For more than 2 decades, the Southern